Welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at all of the explosive guns, explosive weapons. These are not going to be including the weapons that are thrown or placed, so no grenades and no mines. These are only ones that you fire, usually from the shoulder, and we're going to be talking about each of them. I don't use explosives a whole ton. I don't remember the last time I actually had a dedicated explosives run in New Vegas. Usually it's a weapon that I pick up and just kind of fire whenever I find ammo for it or find the weapon, because the explosive weapons are super fun. Major downside to them is that they generally are very heavy and their ammunition is very heavy too. So since I play on the hardcore difficulty and since I'm usually playing on very hard, the explosives are extremely dangerous for myself too. So some of these weapons I don't use very often at all. First up, we have all of our grenade rifles, and there is 5 of them. 2 of them I always forget that they even exist. So with our very first grenade rifle, this is just the basic grenade rifle. This one requires 25 explosives and 3 strength to wield. Basically all the explosive weapons do good damage per shot, and they have a very high chance of crippling limbs. That goes both ways, crippling enemy limbs and crippling your own limbs. So try to be careful with explosives. The grenade rifle is pretty good since you can find it early on. You can find 40mm grenades early on. This does really well against big enemies like the giant rad scorpions. It does well against any of the large bugs that you can find. It does well against basically anything. The main issue with this weapon and kind of all the explosive weapons is that explosive weapons like this are generally not very good to be using indoors, because they can still do a lot of friendly fire damage to you most of the time. Usually I go over the crit modifier and crit damage with these weapons, but explosives tend to suck with crit modifiers and crit damage. Like the grenade rifle has 1 times crit modifier and 1 crit damage. So just don't build crits if you're going with a dedicated explosives build. It just doesn't help. There is one modification that you can put on the grenade rifle, that is the longer barrel. So that just gives you double the effective range. The regular grenade rifle though, compared to other weapons, it's actually pretty good if you can get it in the early game. I would say that this is a solid B tier. It's pretty nice. Up next we have the Mercenaries grenade rifle. This is very similar to the regular grenade rifle. It's basically just an upgrade to it in a lot of ways, just because you can start out with it, and it requires less explosives. So this one requires 0 explosives and only 3 strength. Other than that, its stats are almost identical to the regular one. Crits suck. It has good damage, it has pretty decent damage per second, so this one is also going to go to B tier. Up next we have Thump Thump. This is the unique grenade rifle. You can find this at the Boomer's place. It's in with all of the ants. So if you go down there, you will find it just sitting against a wall, I believe. I think it might be near a body as well. Thump Thump requires only 25 explosives and 3 strength, same as the regular grenade rifle. It also already has the attachment to it, so it has the longer barrel length, which is nice, so you have longer range. This does a little bit more damage than the regular grenade rifle. Still doesn't do very well on crits, has the same action point cost, is slightly more accurate, which is good, and it has slightly more item HP. It also just looks nicer overall. I would say this is just a better grenade rifle, but I don't think it's that much better, so I'm still going to keep it in the B tier. I think it's a solid all-around weapon, and you can get this fairly early on. If you grab some turbo, run right up to the Boomer's place, you can just run right across the field, and then you can just get the Ants Misbehaving quest, and just head right over there and pick it up. You don't even have to fight the ants, you can just run and grab it. You can even grab some ammo while you're there, because they do have a stockpile of 40mm grenades. So all of that is pretty nice. And 40mm are not super uncommon for just regular merchants to have. Then we have the 2 kind of oddball grenade rifles, where we have Red Victory and the Great Bear grenade rifle. Both of these are basically the same. They both require 25 explosives and 3 strength. They have the same damage per shot as the regular grenade rifle, I believe. They have slightly less action points, so they are better for an action point build. They do weigh a little bit less, and they have slightly more HP. As well as uniquely, the Great Bear grenade rifle has the most amount of crit damage, I think, out of any of the explosive weapons at 15, which is still pretty terrible for a crit build, so don't build crits for explosives. But it is better than the 1 damage that most of these ones have. The main issue with both the Red Victory and the Great Bear grenade rifle is that you have to complete Lonesome Road, which is basically the endgame DLC. Usually I save that one for last. It's usually considered the most difficult of the DLCs, and once you get to the end, you either have to fire the missiles at NCR, Legion, or both of them in order to get these weapons. So you have to get basically to the very end of the game to get what is essentially just another grenade rifle that is slightly better than it. And I would argue that these aren't better than Thump Thump. So these ones are just rather disappointing. I'm going to put both of them into C tier just for that reason alone. I don't think it's worth going for either one of these unless you just happen to really like the colors of them. Up next, we have the grenade launcher. The grenade launcher is pretty awesome. This is basically the same as the grenade rifle, just it holds 4 rounds. It's pump action, and you can fire these out one after another, so you get more effective DPS than the grenade rifle. There isn't really a downside to this, because it has the same action points cost as the regular grenade rifle. It's just as accurate as it. I guess the one downside is that it does even less crit damage at 0, so if you hit a crit, you don't even get 1 more point of damage. And the other, I guess, major downside is that its weight is pretty heavy. It weighs 12, however, if you're running heavyweight, that can be cut down to 6, so that's not that bad, and then it's basically the same as the grenade rifle. I would say the grenade launcher is just A tier. I think it's better than the grenade rifle. I tend to like it a bit more. It is really cool to just be firing a China Lake at stuff. So yeah, that one's probably one of my favorites for just firing 40mm grenades, and it's pretty solid for doing its job. Up next, we have the 25mm grenade APW. This one is a rather unique weapon. This one fires the 25mm grenade, as the name implies. This one requires 75 explosives and 5 strength. This one does kind of lowish damage per shot, although it can shoot pretty quick, so its DPS is fairly high. And this one can get some modifications to it. It can have 3 of them. These can be bought at basically any vendor because this is a gunrunner's arsenal weapon. You can get an expanded drum for this, which increases its magazine size from 6 to 8. You can have a longer barrel, which gives you 100% more velocity, similar to the grenade rifle's barrel. And you can also get upgraded internals, which gives it an even higher rate of fire, which this thing already shoots pretty quick, but that's pretty awesome. More DPS, more damage. This one's all around just really good as a standard weapon to be using for an explosives build, and it doesn't do too much friendly fire damage either. You still might get a decent amount of broken limbs, but hey, you might get tough guy a little bit quicker, so I'm going to put the 25mm also up into A tier. I think it's really good. Our next weapon is the missile launcher. The missile launcher is pretty good. It's been pretty consistent across like all of the Fallout games where you had a missile launcher or rocket launcher, and the missile launcher in this one is also pretty decent. So the missile launcher requires 75 explosives and 6 strength. This one does pretty good damage and pretty decent damage per second, at least if you have high agility. You will probably want to invest in agility if you are going with an explosives build because almost every weapon reloads fairly slow. Having higher agility makes it so you can reload a little bit quicker. Low spread, this is actually surprisingly accurate at a distance, but it does weigh a lot, just like a lot of these explosive weapons, coming in at 20. So heavyweight will drop it down to 10, and this one can have an upgrade, single upgrade. You can get the increased accuracy for it with its stability system, I believe, or guidance system, which increases its accuracy. That's not bad. The missile launcher is actually pretty good, and missiles in this game don't weigh too much, since I believe they only weigh 1. And if you take Pack Rat, they'll get cut in half, so you can have just half-weight missiles. And I would put the missile launcher probably into A tier. So long as you're not really using it indoors, you should be fine. If you are using it indoors, be careful with it. Up next, we have the unique version of the missile launcher. This is Annabelle. Annabelle requires 75 explosives and 5 strength as well. This also does high damage, more damage than the regular missile launcher, and it also already has the guidance system on it, so it is more accurate. This one also requires less action point cost if you want to use it in VATS, which is nice. It's still not going to be amazing in a VATS build, just because of the follow-up shots. It also weighs less, only coming in at 15, so if you take heavyweight again, cuts that down to 7.5 weight. That's pretty manageable, and this one is pretty good. The main downside to this one is where you get it. You have to go to Black Mountain in order to get it, which is a fairly difficult area to go through, at least if you want to go there early on, because you have a bunch of super mutants. The super mutants in New Vegas are pretty tough, and they generally have pretty good weapons. Even if you wanted to rush it early, you still have to deal with somebody having this weapon, and that can be kind of an issue too. But yeah, Annabelle, pretty good. I would say this one's also A tier. I think it's an all-around solid explosive weapon. And then we move on to the really big boys here. This is the Fat Man. The Fat Man requires 100 explosives and 8 strength. It's one of the highest requirement weapons just in the game in general. This is one of the signature Fallout weapons. You fire out mini-nukes from this. It just catapults them out there. Does massively high damage to anything that you hit. And anything nearby, as well as it has lingering radiation from the explosives. There's also a bunch of different explosives that you can load into this. However, it is also extremely dangerous, and I basically never use it on hardcore difficulty because you can only really use this outdoors. You can't use a Fat Man indoors easily. Now, the Fat Man also has a lot of action point cost, so it's not really great for that. It weighs a lot, coming in at 30, so even with its weight cut in half from heavyweight, that's still 15. Still pretty hefty. It has low health, but you're realistically not going to be going through a ton of Fat Man nukes anyway. If you do get the Gunrunner's Arsenal version of this, you can get the upgrade which cuts it down, the Little Boy kit. So it decreases its weight by half, so it gets cut down to 15. Then if you have heavyweight, then it cuts down to 7.5. That's pretty manageable. Mini-nukes are the only ammunition that's not affected by pack rat though, because they weigh 3 each. So they are pretty hefty. Now the Fat Man outdoors is like S tier. If you just need to kill something or need to kill a decent group of something, and you can do it at a safe distance. If you're indoors, it's probably D tier. And if you're against fast enemies, it's also probably in D tier. If you're being kind of careless, it's in D tier. Even on just like the normal difficulty, it is very, very easy to kill yourself with the Fat Man. And I don't use it that much. So for me personally, I think I'm going to put it like in the middle B tier for that reason. Because it has some extremes where it can do really, really well. If you're up on a high vantage point and you're just firing down on something, really good. If you're on the same level as it, or you're indoors, or you're close to anything that might have a wonky hitbox, probably D tier, so it fluctuates probably the most out of any weapon. Esther is in a similar spot. This is the unique version of the Fat Man. This one also requires 100 explosives and 8 strength. This one does even more damage than the regular Fat Man. This one also has a damage resist shield on it, which is very annoying to use. I really hate this one because it just blocks so much of your screen. Although it does technically shield you from some of the damage. This one weighs even more than the regular Fat Man, coming in at 40 weight. And this doesn't even get the unique little boy kit that you can put on the Fat Man. So the lowest you can get this is 20 weight with heavyweight. I never use this. I actually think this is worse than a regular Fat Man. Like in every way. I hate its sights. I hate the way it does. It hits really hard, but it still has all the same issues that the regular Fat Man has. So I'm going to put it even lower in C tier. Then we've got the grenade machine gun. This one is a pretty awesome weapon. This one also fires the 20mm or 25mm grenade. It's the only one that does it besides the APW. All the rest of these launchers shoot 40mm or something like missiles. This one requires 100 explosives and 8 strength. This one does pretty okay damage per shot, good damage per second though, because it can fire fast. It has no crit damage as usual, high action point cost, so it's not really great for a VATS build, okay spread, and it does weigh 15. So again, heavyweight cuts it down to 7.5, that's not so bad. It also has a decent amount of item health. This one is another really good general purpose weapon, and I think it is kind of just an upgrade to the 25mm. It's just the main downside to getting these is that they're very rare. You rarely find anybody having these ones. They're kind of difficult to fix unless you're running weapon repair kits. And yeah, it can be a bit of a struggle, but once you get them going, they are really, really strong. So I'm going to put this one up into S tier. I think it's a really good use of the 25mm grenade. Then we have the unique variant of it, which is called Mercy. Mercy shoots the 40mm grenade. It holds less shots overall, but it will do more damage per second because of the grenade that it's firing. This one, weirdly enough, has a 13 times crit modifier on it. It has no crit damage, but you can hit crits with it super reliably, which is very, very weird. I don't know why they chose to do that. It has less action point cost than the regular grenade machine gun, which is still fairly high, so it's not really the best there. Same type of spread. This one by itself, I'm going to say is S tier. I think it's also really, really good. It's probably the best use of the 40mm grenade, at least if you just want to get the most amount of DPS out of it. You could argue something like the grenade launcher or Thump Thump might get a little bit more use out of this because you can shoot those shots a little bit more accurately and a little bit further than something like Mercy can. The other major downside to getting Mercy is that it's in the Dead Wind Cavern, which is probably the most difficult area in the game to go through, since it is a very small cavern that is just jam-packed full of death claws, including alpha death claws, and that is very, very scary. And then our last explosive weapon is the Red Glare. Red Glare is the unique weapon, or one of the unique weapons from the Lonesome Road. You can find this on Marked Min. This fires the rocket, which is a unique ammunition type as well. It's not the same as missiles, although I think you can convert missiles to rockets or vice versa. This one does okay damage per shot. It actually has a very fast rate of fire, and it does very low friendly fire damage. This one's actually pretty safe to be using at almost point blank range. You can still break your limbs with it, but you're not going to be blowing yourself up with it like some of these other weapons. So that's actually pretty nice. DPS is pretty good, no crit chance. Again, this is actually good in the VATS build. I have used that one before. The spread is quite low. Ammunition is good, holding 13, and it does weigh a decent amount coming in at 20. Again, you can cut that in half with heavyweight down to 10. And this one does have 3 mods, just like the other weapons in the Lonesome Road. I guess it's just this and the shoulder-mounted machine gun. But this one gets the Alpha Strike, which is faster moving rockets. That one's pretty nice. The auto launcher for faster rate of fire. That one's also pretty good. And then the far sighting system, which gives you just increased zoom from its flip down sight. That's pretty nice too. All of these are kind of quality of life options for the red glare. And the cool thing about this is that you can also repair it with missile launchers if you have jury rigging. That's all really nice. There's nothing really bad about the red glare, but I don't think it's quite like an S tier weapon. I think it's cool, and I'd put it like A tier because I really enjoy this one. It's basically on par with the missile launchers. These ones hit harder, but there's more of a delay, and they're not as good against small enemies, like, say, Kazdors. Then the red glare is really, really good for that, or things like fire geckos. The red glare is very good for that. No D tiers here, besides, I guess, like the Fat Man. If you're using it indoors, then yeah, it's D tier. But everything else pretty decent for explosive weapons. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Tell me your thoughts on all of these weapons down in the comments below. Which is your favorite? And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.